Hello, welcome once again to Pale Blooms and Beyond. Thank you for joining us today. If you do like the programming you see here and the musicians and artists I visit with, please be sure and hit the like button and also subscribe to the channel. Jim Lockhart is an Irish multi-instrumentalist and singer, best known as a member of the band Horslips. Early on, Jim studied classical music at Trinity College, Dublin. Regarded as the first Celtic rock group, Horslips began in 1970 and had a run of 10 years until 1980. The band would reunite from the periods 2004 to 2006 and then again from 2009 to 2012. Over the career of the band, there have been some 10 studio albums, many singles, a few live releases, and compilations. After a lengthy legal battle, the band gained rights to their back catalog and beginning in 2000, have re-released and remastered the original albums on CD, courtesy of Edsel Records. Just this year, the 4 CD, DVD, and 2 LP collection Horslips at the BBC was released. In 1986, Jim did release a single as a solo artist, theme From Glenroe. More recently, Mr. Lockhart worked on radio at RTE 2FM, where he was head of production. Today, my guest is retired from radio and enjoying family life. Well, welcome, Jim.
Hi, thanks, Greg. Thanks for having me. You've done a lot of homework. That's a whole
I tried to.
research.
Well, take us back. Where were you born?
I was born in Dublin, and just to so excuse me for correcting you, but it's out there. It was on Wikipedia or something for a good while that I did classical music in Trinity, which isn't actually quite correct. I did classical music. I mean, I did study piano since I was like 10 or something like that. But my university was actually University College Dublin, and I did economics and politics for a few years there. I mean, I was playing music at the same time, but my actual discipline was economics, which is a very weird one to look back on. And so um, I was born in Dublin and yeah, grew up here. So my mother was from the west of Ireland, my dad was from Belfast, so I wouldn't be considered a true Dubliner by true Dubliners.
True Dublin. Okay, well, again, that just proves the point. You can't believe everything you read on the internet, right?
You really can't. I
Right.
find that actually if one error creeps in someplace, it gets copied all over the place, and then it suddenly looks kind of authoritative. Because
Yes.
I found that that stuff had actually sprung up everywhere, and everywhere I looked, I discovered things that I didn't know about myself. But I think that probably happens, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. Well, yeah, I'm a Dallasite. I've lived in and around Dallas my whole life. So,
Ah,
well,
cool.
well, do you recall early childhood growing up? Was there music in the house?
Um, Not a whole lot, no. We got a piano at some stage when I was a kid, and I started playing. I started playing at 10, so it was probably around then we got a piano. And then in school there was a kind of little folk group, and so I started playing as well as singing. I started playing tin whistle, and we were doing choir stuff and that at school. So yeah, I mean, I wound up doing because I was doing music on my own outside of school. I did it in my state exams, and kind of, yeah, I got fairly into it. I progressed it quite a bit. It gave me a
Yeah.
huge taste for classical, and then I got a good kind of grounding in music theory, which turned out to be incredibly useful in terms of arrangements and just kind of keeping a handle on stuff. Because otherwise, you're never, if you don't know the theory of it, you're not too sure what's going on, I think, a lot of the time.
That's right. You need that basis behind the music. Well, early on in school, did they teach you recorder or have a recorder class?
No, we didn't have any music in school.
Okay.
Apart, well, so that's not quite true. We did choir, but we were mostly singing. We were just singing hymns, like my main memory is singing Dies Irae. Dies
Ah,
Irae, dies illa, solvet seclum in favilla, falsum cum sibilla. Wow, it's great. It still comes
You
back.
still remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just heard from a few that they had to learn the recorder, so I thought I'd throw that out there. Thought that was interesting. Well, so either one of your parents were not musically inclined at all?
Either. No, not really. I think my dad probably played a bit when he was a kid.
Okay.
I think he played violin, but I never heard him play. He never played it when I was growing up, you know.
Oh,
I
okay.
think it was just a thing that he did for a while when he was young.
Okay. Well, what was the first musical instrument you learned to play?
Piano.
Okay, the piano.
And
Okay.
then I sort of taught myself tin whistle. In Ireland, recorder is like one of the is the thing that people in Britain would pick up in school, whereas in Ireland, since we've got like a live folk tradition, which includes tin whistle among other things, people would, if they were starting off something like that, starting off a wind instrument, they would pick up a tin whistle rather than a recorder. Some people do, but mostly it would be tin whistle. And people who would be learning kind of folk music, Irish traditional music, would typically start on either tin whistle, violin, concertina increasingly these days. And so there's a huge blossoming of Irish traditional music in the last 20, 30 years. I mean, it's come on extraordinarily. It wasn't, there was a kind of, when I was growing up, there was a kind of post-colonial self-hatred thing going on because we only became independent from Britain in like 1921, 22. And so after a long, long time when we were kind of told that our own language was pretty much almost wiped out. And so that kind of took a long, that whole colonial experience took a long time to get over. So it was only when I was kind of growing up like in the 60s that people started to stick their heads out of the sand and think, hang on a second, you know, it's not that bad.
Yeah.
And there was a guy called Sean O'Riordan who was a composer and arranger here in he did some orchestral music for a documentary film called Misha Era, which was a kind of collection of whatever film footage there was of Irish history and prehistory up until about 1920. And he did orchestral arrangements for that of Irish themes. Uh, and that kind of really reopened people's eyes to what this music was like, because before then it was very unfashionable and it was very looked down on. And if you tried to sing a ballad or a folk song in a pub, you'd be put out. It was seen as like very low class stuff to be doing. O'Riordan really single-handedly changed all that. And then within a couple of years, the folk boom that had been building in the States with Woody Guthrie and Pete Seeger and all that kind of stuff, that and then it became Bob Dylan and Greenwich Village and the Clancy Brothers. So the
Yeah.
Clancy Brothers kind of washed back into Ireland from the States, along with all the other American stuff. And that happened to coincide with a growth in the popularity or respectability or admissibility even of Irish traditional music. And so you had this kind of renaissance through the 60s and a new awareness of what this material really was like and what a treasury of stuff we had. And it's kind of come on since then, unrecognizably. Like when I was teenager, the main bagpipes in Ireland are uilleann pipes, unlike the Scottish pipes, Scottish war pipes. Our Irish bagpipes are a much more sophisticated kind of instrument, in that there's a chanter, as in the Scottish bagpipes. It's different because you can play two octaves, whereas Scottish bagpipes you've got one. And there's drones, but then there's also regulators, which give you it's the equivalent of having a lead guitar, a bass guitar, and a rhythm guitar. You know, the
All
regulators,
in one.
rhythm and
Yeah.
guitar, all in
Well,
one incredibly complicated, difficult,
wow.
tricky instrument to play. Um, so um, uh, when I was like teenager, that was falling. It was really in danger of becoming extinct, as the Irish harp tradition became extinct in about 1800, 1840. Um, we don't quite know what the Irish harp, the original old Irish harp sounded like. We know that it was wire strung. We know that it was a smaller minstrel harp rather than a kind of big orchestral harp that you would see now. And we know that the kind of technique that the harpers of the time had was apparently pretty extraordinary, because writers from different countries who really weren't very much in favor of the Irish spoke in glowing terms about the effect of this music. So it looks like there was a very healthy musical tradition here going back a long, long time, going back to sort of 900 AD, which would have been associated also with early choral music, early sacred music, which looks
Yeah.
like it had an influence then on European sacred music because Irish monks went out and traveled all over Europe. Anyway, I'm getting away from what I was saying, which was that um, Uilleann pipes really bounced back, and now there's pipers all over the place. And Irish traditional music has kind of wound its way into, it's become the kind of first world music
Yeah.
for a lot of people. It's the first bit of world, what became known as world music that people would encounter. And
It's
you've got the chieftains, and then you've got like
yeah.
low whistle cropping up in The Lord of the Rings and Titanic and all that kind of stuff, you know. So that the kind of flavor of Irish traditional music has
Yeah.
seeped into an awful lot of stuff. And
It's kind of
it's river
it's kind
dance.
of it's kind of woven into the fabric.
Pretty much. And
To-
Riverdance became like
yeah.
the
That
only music show you can see from space, you know.
right. Exactly. Well, that's interesting because I love roots music too. You know, the folk roots and going back, the Irish harp. Wow. Has anyone tried to kind of resurrect that instrument or rebuild one today? You know, with
Which,
what the Irish harp, the
oh
harp.
yeah, there's plenty of harps around.
Yeah.
There's plenty of people playing harp, and there's plenty of people playing what would seem like a fairly good approximation to what it would have sounded like.
Facsimile.
What O'Riordan did was, as well as doing orchestral versions of Irish music, he also reconstructed kind of folk orchestra, because at the time the main ensemble playing for traditional music was a Cayley band, which
Yes.
begun to sound pretty cliched by sort of the 50s, 60s. So instead of a piano, he put in a harpsichord. Instead of drums, he put in bodhrán and bones. He put in a button accordion instead of a piano accordion, being a much more rootsy sound. The reason for harpsichord was that he reckoned, since harpsichord in a harpsichord the strings are plucked,
Yeah.
and there were strings, he reckoned that that would have sounded pretty close to the overall sound of the old wire strung harp.
Right.
And so yeah, we're getting
Yeah.
close. But I
I
mean,
love,
Irish music's a kind of broad church, and there's a lot of, new stuff has come in. Bouzouki came in.
oh,
Two guys, Andy Irvine and Johnny Moynihan, brought back bouzouki's from their travels in Eastern Europe
yeah.
around about the sort of mid 60s to late 60s, and now they're completely part of the canon. Low whistle, which is that sound that you hear on Lord of the Rings and stuff. Um, that really only became a thing in about 1970, because Finbar Fury of the Fury brothers,
Very right.
he had a low A whistle, which was a bamboo whistle that he had picked up in a street market, Indian whistle.
Oh,
And
okay.
it started to fall apart. It was kept together with gaffer tape, and he ran into this uh, British engineer guy called Overton, and said, "Yeah." They got chatting over a couple of drinks, and he said, "Yeah, I've got this whistle. It's falling apart. Do you think you could make me one?" And Overton looked at it and made it, and then that became the Overton whistle, which was the first kind of low whistle. Now there are low whistles being made all over the world, particularly in the States. I mean, they really became a thing in America. And now low whistle is also another integral part of Irish music, but that kind of happened over the years. I mean, accordions would have only come in a couple of hundred years ago. I don't know, violins probably weren't that far before that again. The original instruments in like that we see in old engravings and in old manuscripts and stuff would be the harp and the bagpipes. So they'd be the kind of
Yes.
real rootsy jobs and some kind of whistle, yeah.
Yes. I'm really enjoying this, Jim, this kind of history lesson too.
Mm.
And
Good.
I think the viewers
Yeah,
will.
stop me when you want, because otherwise it's
No,
a
no,
lecture mode.
I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying. I love history, but yeah, it's kind of similar to what was going on. You talk about the language, the Irish, the Celtic language, the similar thing going on in Wales too,
Mm.
with their traditional language, and a lot of the people there are still, holding on to that, and speak Welsh. I did an interview with a guy who they had a band in the late '60s, early '70s who only sung in Welsh.
Well, there's a good few of them. Like
Yeah,
uh, what Gorky's Zygotic Monkey sang in
right,
Welsh, and what's
right.
the guys Griff, what's Griff's band called?
Yeah,
Plenty of them sing in Welsh. I mean,
yeah,
The Welsh language is really healthy in Wales. It's in a much, at least until the last couple of years, it's been in a much healthier condition, and it's much more widely spoken proportionately among the population than Irish is here. Irish is really kind of pretty much minority. It's very much a minority language here, but it is actually gaining popularity in the last 2 or 3 years, and it's getting to be an online thing, which is kind of pretty cool. Yeah, it's a beautiful language. It's an amazing language, and it's got a big history. Like if you look at Indo-European languages started to diverge. God, I don't know when. I knew they diverged, and one end, the older end on the eastern end, became Sanskrit, and the oldest one on the western end would have been Old Irish and Lithuanian. Oddly enough, strange bedfellows.
yeah,
So Old Irish has got really its kind of good old pedigree.
yeah, yeah. It's a pretty language, like you said. It really is to
Mm.
hear it spoken. Well, going back earlier on, can you remember one of the first singles or albums that you bought?
Yeah, first album I bought was Beethoven's Fourth and Fifth Piano Concertos.
Okay, okay.
Paul Badura Skoda.
There's that classical influence. Yeah.
I remember one of
Okay.
the first singles, oddly enough, was an EP by Jimmy Smith. It was Slaughter on 10th Avenue.
Oh,
How
okay.
weird is that?
Okay.
In fact, what amazed me at the time was that what I really loved about it was the brass intro, um, rather than the jazz organ. I mean, he's an amazing organ player. Was an amazing organ player, but I didn't kind of get into organ until a lot later. But what blew me away was the brass stuff at the top, which I discovered then was Oliver Nelson. And that still knocks me out. Anything pretty much Oliver Nelson did was amazing. So that was, and then a friend of mine in later years had a whole bunch of soul singles, and I started listening to a lot of soul stuff. And I was listening to a bit of jazz. I was listening to kind of, yeah, traditional jazz, Dixie, all that sort of stuff,
All
as
right.
well
Well,
as like in those days we didn't have um, a broad range of radio stations. We had like a national radio, which was Radio Éireann, and on that, you could get BBC from England, and you could get some foreign stations, but not particularly clearly. Um,
okay.
and so pretty much everything would have come in on one radio station. So you'd be exposed to classical music, traditional music, no jazz, oddly enough, until kind of later. There was a bit of an anti-jazz thing in Ireland before I was born. That it kind of faded away pretty much by then. And there was a kind of jazz scene here. But what the point I'm making is that you got a bit of everything. Everybody was exposed to all different kinds of music. Um, so you got a good kind of broad base of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a healthy way to,
Mm.
grow like that. Well, can you remember one of the first live concerts you attended, live shows that you went to?
But I don't. You see, the thing was there weren't
Yeah.
um there
Okay.
a lot of touring bands didn't kind of tour here. They would come over very rarely. Johnny Cash came here at one stage. I don't remember that. And that was probably sometime in the late 60s. Um, but we weren't kind of on the map for international touring bands, and we didn't have the venues, and we didn't have the like infrastructure. There'd be people like put your sweet lips a little closer to the phone. What was his name? Jim Reeves.
Oh, Jim Reeves. Yeah.
He came and he did a tour of kind of dance halls nationally,
Yeah.
and he was singing with kind of local show bands. But and then in 1969, the Troubles in Northern Ireland kicked off, and so anybody who might have thought about coming here
Right.
is no,
I
look,
can avoid that.
thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Yeah.
So one of the first gigs I remember seeing was Skid Row. That's not your Skid Row, that's our
No,
Skid Row, the original Skid
e-
Row. But
exactly.
that would have been probably like 1970 or 71 in the stadium, the National Stadium. And
Yeah.
actually, I saw I saw Stravinsky. I
Did
saw
you?
Stravinsky conducting. He was pretty frail. And there's a guy called Robert Kraft, I think, who was traveling around with him. They were doing a European tour or something. And Kraft was doing most of the work. Stravinsky conducted one short piece. And they did Rite of Spring and can't remember what else. And I was a kid. My dad brought me. But that was big. Like, that's Stravinsky up there.
Yeah.
Uh,
Right. That would impress you. That would, especially
yeah, yeah, big
as,
time.
as young.
It's
Well,
weird. I mean, it's weird to think that I actually saw him.
yeah, yeah. Before he passed. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Well. What were some early musical influences and bands for you that would kind of shape, your with the Horslips later on?
Dave Brubeck. I love Dave Brubeck, and I love that kind of style. There was a whole uh, what, what's his name? Sidney Bechet. I loved Sidney Bechet, and that kind of Dixie clarinet and Louis Armstrong, Ella Fitzgerald, that kind of style of stuff. And then like early kind of pop soul stuff like Wilson Pickett and Sam
Yeah.
and Dave and all that kind of carry on, that was good.
Oh yes. Oh yes. Well, I've heard how influential the soul and the R&B was over there across the pond. Well, were you in a band prior to Horslips?
Um, no, I played with a couple of friends, like we were kind of doing odd kind of folky stuff, but like crossover, Mose Allison kind of stuff,
Oh,
like Parchment Farm and things like that. And uh, and then kind of that mixed with odd bits of English folk music and occasional Irish folk music. And like I was playing Take Five on a tin whistle as part,
yeah.
you know what I mean? So I was kind of into blending different influences from pretty early on.
Oh, kind of fusion, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
without knowing that was what it was. Yeah,
What it was, predating that.
yeah.
Wow. Well. So tell the story how Horslips came together, how the band formed.
Um, I was in UCD and I met up with Barry Devlin in the Cumann which was the Irish Language Dramatic Society, and we kind of we got to know each other because we were backstage at some local hall down the country, and myself and a guy called Mick Friel were mucking around working out the chords to some Beatles songs, and Devlin joined in because he was a Beatles freak, and then we discovered that we had a whole load of other stuff in common, and we started hanging out. And after he left, he was a year ahead of me. When he left, he joined an advertising agency, and in a while they needed a band for to mime to a jingle they had for something or other. Um, and any bands they got in were pretty spotty looking and awful. And they said, "Doesn't Devlin play guitar? And hey, your man Eamon Carr, he's copywriter. He plays drums, doesn't he? We could get them in." And Charles O'Connor, this English guy who had joined up as an artist from England, he played guitar. And they said, "We need a keyboard player." And Barry said, "Yeah, I know this guy who plays keyboards. Can you give me 20 minutes?" And so he ran out thinking, I mean, chance in 100 that he might find me strolling up to the college through Stephen's Green, which was a park right beside the college, and also beside the ad agency. And sure enough, as luck would have it, there I was, dawdling up late for a tutorial. Um, and and so he got me in, and we did the thing, we mimed it, and then we went off and got drunk and said, it'd be great fun. We did have a band, so we started practicing, and then stuff started coming together. And because we were kind of practicing an R&B set or a rock and roll set, kind of. But as it happened, Charles had, as well as playing guitar, he also had concertina and mandolin and fiddle, and I had a tin whistle, and Eamon also played bowron as well as playing drums. And so we started playing kind of traditional stuff in our breaks, and then they just started to, that's the traditional stuff started to filter into the rock and roll stuff. And then it just kind of became a thing, and we started to think this actually sounds kind of okay. Um, and then by the weirdest of coincidences, we found ourselves with a TV series for a couple of weeks, with a slot on a TV series. Um, and what the producer liked about what we were doing was this slightly new approach to doing electric versions of Irish traditional stuff.
Yeah.
So, so
Well,
we did.
how did you secure that slot? How did you get on that?
A friend of ours happened to be the researcher on the program, and we were playing at her birthday party one night, and sitting in the corner with concertina and tin whistle and stuff. Um, and she said, that's really interesting. I think the guy Joe O'Donnell, my producer, would be interested in hearing that." And sure enough, Joe loved it and gave us our first break and ran with it.
Wow.
Um, yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
The right place at the right time. One of those.
totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you
And
mentioned being.
then, oddly enough,
Go ahead.
like when we started playing live, and we started playing this um, fusion kind of stuff, which I think we still even weren't calling it. But when we started doing experimental electrified or partially electrified versions of Irish music, or rock and roll that was kind of influenced by Irish themes, um, the response was amazing, because it was like as if people recognized it on some kind of visceral level and say, "Hey, that's our stuff. That's our music."
Right.
And the response was extraordinary. People really cottoned onto it, like, no problem. Yeah, that's great. That's ours. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was kind of a different niche,
Mm,
creating that. Um,
sure.
and
Yeah.
yeah, for I think that was a good marketing ploy, especially to try to meld the two together. Well, interesting. Originally, the name was Horslips,
Oh yeah, it went
SLYPSE.
through a
Yeah,
couple of
yeah,
variations. It went through some permutations.
yeah.
But actually, the thing is, you're saying marketing, but in fact, it wasn't. We
Okay.
weren't doing it as a marketing thing. We were doing it
Yeah,
really kind of because it felt like if we were going to be a blues band, we'd be doing blues music that was from the Delta or whatever, and how well could we ever get to do that? Or
yeah,
if we were doing like Liverpool beat stuff, we'd be doing English music, or
yeah.
anything else would be trying to do somebody else's music at one remove. And it seemed to kind of make sense. Like, if the idea of doing any kind of art, is to transmute your daily experience into some kind of artifact, to give it some kind of permanence or to give it some kind of meaning, um, then you have to be kind of talking about your own experience. If you're talking about somebody else's experience, you're not going to be,
Right.
on some level, it's going to be less you.
Yes,
So
it
I
has to
think
have
that was
a
kind of,
personal.
I don't know if we articulated it quite like that, but I think at root that was like the motivation, really.
You have to have your own personal touch.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask about the original name, Horslypse.
Oh yeah,
I
it
wonder if that
started
was
off
like
like that
was that
drunken
like
evening,
a concise of
that drunken evening after we did.
horseman of the apocalypse?
It was that
Okay.
we started off. Somebody said, "What do we call ourselves?"
Yeah.
And somebody said, "The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse," because there was five of us at that stage,
Yeah.
and so then it got condensed down to Horslips.
Okay. That's what
And,
I thought. That's what
and
I
really not a very clever from a marketing point of view.
right. All right. And then it was changed to LIPS.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, you mentioned playing live. What were some of the early live shows like? Mm.
Uh, we started off, we were rehearsing in an art gallery that a friend of ours owned, and so we decided to, he was putting on an exhibition of his own stuff, um, and we said, okay, let's just play all day. So we played all day or all afternoon or something, and people would just come and go, and we played like a 45, 50-minute set, and then took 5 minutes break, and then repeated it a couple of times. So that was our kind of first gig, and then we played a couple of student uh, venues, and then started branching out. Basically, started going to kind of rural places and played small halls, and just kind of built it up like that. It was, and then we did a festival in Dublin, like early days, and it was the festival had been organised by two guys called Paul McGuinness and Michael Deeney. Paul McGuinness later became the manager of U2, and Michael Deeney was a school friend of his, and they were kind of getting into doing rock and roll stuff together. And Deeney kind of liked what he saw of us and came to us afterwards and said, "Have you guys got a manager?" And we had friends of ours were kind of helping out and driving us places, and my mother was taking phone calls at home, and somebody would ring off
Yeah.
us a gig and stuff. And so we said, "Yeah, what have you got?" And so we did a deal, and he became our manager, and he reckoned that there was this chain of not a chain, there was like a huge infrastructure of dance halls right around the country, right around Ireland, which were literally dance halls with show bands playing cover versions. They were kind of pre-discos because discos hadn't become a thing. These were like live cover bands, and they would have 1,500, 2,000, 2,500 people in couple of nights every weekend. And he said if we could get into that, that's a lucrative kind of circuit. So we gradually did get into that circuit, which meant that we then we were able to kind of finance doing our own recording and stuff, which gave us a lot of independence. Before that, um, an Irish band would have to go to London and try and make it from there. Um, I don't think anybody tried to go to the States to make it from there. I mean, it was difficult enough to get to London and try and survive for 6 or 12 months and live in the van and eat porridge.
Yeah.
Was there was a story about Henry McCullough, who wound up playing guitar with Joe Cocker and then with Paul McCartney, and also did all the guitar on Jesus Christ Superstar. Lovely guy, lovely guitar player. Only died a couple of years ago. Really lovely man. Um, when his band, which had been called The People, and which their new manager Chaz Chandler, who had been in the Animals, was also Hendrix's manager, he took them on and brought them to England. And when they went to London first, they slept in the van, but um, the van had a leak in the roof, so they used to have to park it under a railway bridge if it was raining, and people would sleep in the van, a couple would sleep underneath. That was kind of par for the course. So we were kind of lucky and unusual in that we uh, got a bit of independence like that,
Yeah,
commercial independence from early on.
yeah, yeah. Well, who was behind Oates Records?
Michael Deeney,
Oh, that's okay.
that was
That's
his baby, yeah. Like he was the one with the commercial chops, who said, there's no reason why we couldn't actually do our own label and set up our own record company. So really, yeah. And there was a pressing plant here, which was pretty handy. And yeah, it kind of came together,
yeah,
which gave us, for better or worse, commercial control, artistic control rather,
there you go.
because that means that you don't have an A&R man telling you, don't hear a single. But that's a good and a bad thing. I mean, it means you can go and do what you like, but you don't always do the most commercial thing. So we kind of, like, all our albums were kind of different. We didn't set up a kind of house sound and stick with it. We were kind of always trying stuff and learning with each album. I mean, our albums were radically different. Like
Oh, oh,
we
we're gonna
did
say,
we
yeah,
did in 75, I think we did um, an acoustic Christmas album called Drive the Cold Winter Away. We kind of went back to our roots because we felt we had kind of strayed a bit far from our roots. We had done four studio albums at that stage, and the third and the fourth, Drive the Cold, Dancehall Sweethearts, and The Unfortunate Cup of Tea, um, we felt we'd kind of lost our way a bit. So we did a live album just to kind of nail down what it was we were doing at that point, and then we kind of sat back and went back to the traditional roots and did this traditional album, which I was just listening to remasters of. We've remastered it. We're gonna do a reissue, and it sounded it sounded gorgeous. It was an amazing, but I mean, radically different from anything else we did, you know.
Right, right. Well, yeah, you're right. All your albums, they all sound different, you know.
Yeah, they
I,
do pretty
I
much.
think I think that's
Not a very commercially clever way to go, but surely
well, I
we
think it
enjoyed it.
works. I think it works. I mean, for fans like me, I still going back to the early. I still enjoy Johnny's Wedding. Uh,
Wow, really? Yeah.
over the years, I bet that's was quite the live favorite, right? Playing that.
You have been doing a bit of homework. God. Yeah. That
Yeah,
was the first single. We did the Johnny's Wedding was the first single, and then Green Gravel was the second one. And Green Gravel was a Belfast street song, children's song. Um, Pretty dark because it's a song that used to be sung at funerals, I think, or it's a kid song that kind of had it was like a corrupted version of a song that was about death and
yeah,
all that
yeah.
sort of stuff.
Well, like a ring
Wedding
around
was
the
good fun, and it was actually, you're right, it was a live favorite for a
yeah,
long time. Yeah,
yeah. Well, like ring around the Rosie, you know, another one.
yeah,
You know
exactly that,
about
exactly
the
that.
black
Yeah,
about the Black Death, you know,
precisely
and
that.
and it's a children's. You know, that blew my mind when I found out what it was actually about. You know, well, I just have a comments on three albums. I won't go over. We won't go over all of your all of the material, but the first album, Happy to Meet, Sorry to Part. I think it's a first nice first effort. And a couple of tracks, my picks, Hall of Mirrors and Furniture. I like both those off of
Um,
that. Yeah. Do you have any recollections or
I love Hall
background?
of Mirrors. I think Hall of Mirrors is really nice because that was an Eamon lyric. Eamon was a poet, still is a poet, and it's just a really good lyric. I think Charles may have done the music for that. Um, Charles certainly sang it and played mandolin, like he had this wah wah mandolin thing going on there. Um, and it was a lovely track. But maybe we were really kind of feeling our way. So happy to meet, sorry to part. Um, we lifted the name from a dance tune. It's a reel, I think. And no, it's a jig. Um, and we did that occasionally. The Unfortunate Cup of Tea was also the name of a dance tune. So what was on that first album was it was like a compilation of all the stuff that we had been playing around with. So it's all these different attempts at finding different directions of what could we do with that? Could we do this? Could we do that? So it goes in various directions, but it's really interesting. When I listened back when we did the remasters on that, Charles and I went over to Abbey Road and spent a couple of days there with Peter Mew, who was doing the remastering for us. And we hadn't heard this stuff for a long time because, as you briefly alluded to, we lost control of our music for a good period after we broke up in 1980. Um, Stuff started coming out that we didn't have any control over. So we had to go through a legal process to reassert our ownership of our own masters. And it took quite a long time. And after we did that, which was like the start of the year 2000, um, within about a year or so, we did that remastering to get stuff out on proper clean CDs that we could stand over. And hearing the stuff back uh, on decent speakers in studio and on headphones and stuff from the original masters was quite a revelation. It was amazing to hear some of the production touches that we had got in there. Alan O'Duffy was Alan O'Duffy, who also died fairly recently, God rest him, a decent man, he produced those first two. Um, and then also produced Book of Invasions and Aliens in the sort of second half of the 70s. Um, but you know, there's bits of little delicate production touches that we had forgotten about, which are a joy to hear. It's very nice.
Yeah, it's nice to hear those come out in the remastering.
Mm.
Like you said, yes, yes. Well, I have a copy of The Tane on CD. I have to say, Horslips material, at least in my area, is pretty rare to find in record stores. Over here, it has been, for some
We
time.
weren't big in Texas. We did some gigs in Texas. We did Dallas and Houston
Yeah.
and we hung out for a week in Corpus Christi, and we did various other places as well. We did Austin. We did Austin a couple of times in
Oh, yeah.
the Armadillo World Headquarters. That was brilliant. Um, but it wasn't kind of a big market for us. We were kind of mainly Northeast and West
Right.
Coast, I
Right.
think. But we played everywhere. I mean, the only major city that we didn't play in the States in that period was New Orleans. Played pretty much everywhere else, like
Oh,
from
okay.
Portland, Washington, down to San Diego, up to
Uh,
Chicago, Rhode Island, Providence.
really? What year? Let me ask you, what year were you in Dallas? Do you remember? Can you remember?
Oh, Jesus, I don't know.
Uh,
The 70s for me is it's a bit of it's a bit of a gray
it's a
area.
blur.
There's a whole lot of stuff. Barry remembers everything, and he tells me a bunch of stuff that I did
Okay.
that I have no
I was
recollection.
just curious.
I
I
have
was just
no
curious.
idea why that should be the case.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's good to have like a biographer in the band who knows.
Right. Right. Exactly. Keep you centered. Yeah.
So I've
Well,
no idea. I think it probably would have been by the time we were doing like US tours of a couple of months at a time, that would have been like 76 to 79, I guess, or 77 to 79, 80.
all right.
That's
Well,
kind of mainly when I mean, we started doing the States in about 74, I think. Canada first, did the Maritimes first, and then we started doing New York and then Northeast.
yeah.
Um, and then sort of gradually worked
Right.
around. But I think it would have been probably 76 to 79, I guess, 76 to 80.
Right. Right. Well, I probably had, if I'd heard you were here, I wasn't aware of the band, so
Would have been before
I
your
would have
time.
missed
Would
it.
have been still in
I
nappies,
would
yeah.
have missed out on it. Yeah. Anyway, well, I've off the Tane. I want to mention the tracks that I like. You Can't Fool the Beast.
Hmm.
That one. Ferdia's song. Ferdia's song is another
Yep.
one I like. And then this is Irish uh, original. I'm not going to be able to pronounce this one. Cuchulain's
Oh,
Lament.
Cuchulainn.
Cuchulainn.
Cuchulainn's
Okay, see, I
yeah.
knew I'd mess that up.
So
Cuchulainn.
that album was like the now hugely sort of unfashionable thing of a concept album because
Yeah,
um, when we were starting, a friend of ours from that Irish Language Dramatic Society in University College Dublin
yeah,
asked he was working in the Abbey Theatre and he asked us he was working on a production of The Táin, which is an ancient Irish legend. It goes back the first written um, copies of it date from 1100, 1200 AD, but the oral transmission of it would go back way further than that. So it's like, it seems like it's an Iron Age, so you're talking about 500 BC to about a couple of hundred AD, like back then. Um, and it's got deep roots, and it's a basic story that everybody would have learned at school here. It's like it's our Odyssey or something. And
oh,
so Cuchulainn was a sort of national mythological hero. He's something that everybody would have been acquainted with. And these myths and legends would have been popularized around the early part of the 20th century by Lady Gregory and W.B. Yeats. Um, Before that, they would have been known to a smaller number of people, but they really kind of hit the big time in terms of popular recognition then. And a new translation had come out in 1969 of the Táin, done by a poet called Thomas Kinsella. And it was much raunchier than the the sort of 1905 version because she had kind of cut out some of the rougher bits because they weren't drawing room appropriate.
Yeah.
And Thomas Kinsella put them all back in, and it suddenly had, holy shit, that's what's going on there. Wow. And uh, Sean O'Brien, who was our friend from UCD, asked us to do music for this dramatic adaptation of it that he was putting on in the Abbey, and we did some preliminary work on that. It didn't happen for various reasons, and so when we came to look about doing a second album, we thought, could we do something with that music we were starting to do for the Town? And so then it grew into an entire Town concept album. So we took the story of the Town and the characters and built the songs around them and built the musical development around them, and that gave us a kind of framework. And it worked, I think, pretty well. Yeah, it was a that was a really interesting exploration for us instrumentally and conceptually and everything. Yeah.
I didn't get to mention my favorite off of that album. It's the Toyne. The Toyne. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Is Faster Than the Hound. That's
Yeah, yeah.
my
Nice track. Lovely,
yeah.
lovely solo from Johnny, as I recall. Yeah.
Yes. Now I'm sure you guys have heard this over the years, but the song definitely recalls Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds.
Wee bit. Yeah, yeah. In terms of progression. Yeah, yeah.
Not a rip,
The
not a
one that
rip,
kind of
but
stands out for us, the one that kind of was a musical benchmark for us from that album was Jarrod Doom, which takes a traditional Irish tune and turns it into a riff, builds a
yeah,
new song on top of it. And that became a very anthemic kind of track in Ireland, and was later used by Larry Mullen um, in the late 80s, was it? Late 80s, late 80s, early 90s. Larry produced a World Cup track for Ireland because the Irish team had got into the World Cup and was doing very well in the World Cup. And Larry did this track which sampled the football manager at the time, guy called Jack Charlton, and used the riff from Jarrod Doom and used a couple of other things. So that track had a whole new lease of life and a whole new format that then. So that was like our biggest, that was our best achievement, I think, musically at that period. It was the first time, as far as I know, that alien pipes had been used in behind a guitar solo because there's pipes kind of dueling with the guitar and the solo in the middle of it. Um, and then there's tin whistle at the end and banjo in a rock and roll track. So it was kind of pretty adventurous for when it was. It's pretty adventurous, full stop, I think. Yeah.
when was the last time Ireland won the World Cup? When did
Oh,
you-
we never won the World Cup.
Oh,
No,
you've
no,
never won. Okay.
never won it. No, we
Oh, I
got
didn't.
in it and we did pretty
Okay.
well, but we
I,
didn't win it. No,
I'm
no,
not okay. I didn't mean to.
no. No, Ireland's pretty small beer in terms of international soccer. Um, but we were doing pretty well at that time, and the team had some really good players and a really
Okay.
good manager.
Oh,
Can't
oh,
remember. I can't remember how far we got, but we did pretty okay.
yeah. Okay. I didn't mean to rub that in. Well,
Brazil ain't.
from 76's Book of Invasions. That's a nice album. To
Mm.
nice fusion of Celtic folk and prog progressive. It's very progressive. Very layered album as well. From what I've heard, I think it's the band's best effort. Uh,
I think so. I'd agree with you there. It's my favorite Horslips album. I kind of I share it a bit with Drive the Cold Winter Away with the acoustic album from a year before. But I think it's the fullest realization of what we were about in terms of blending traditional influences and rock and roll influences and coming up with something that was fairly uniquely ours. I think that's when we kind of um, set the tone of what we were trying to do and achieved it best. I think I particularly liked it because I was using some really nice keyboards on that, and I loved the sound of what I was getting. There was a really nice Rhodes, and it was a lovely C3, and there was a nice. I used a couple of different synths. I used synths occasionally. I didn't ever really use synths live because Mini Moog was just still in those days was too difficult to kind of tune for live performance. Um, and I'd already had enough difficulty trying to tune alien pipes for live performance. Like really, really tricky. So trying to tune electronics was a bridge too far. But I had I think it was an SH101 or something like that. Beautiful Roland monophonic synth. It was gorgeous. Anyway, it was a nice blend, and O'Duffy did a lovely mixed job on it. It was yeah, a very satisfying album to have got
Yeah.
done.
Daybreak, the opening, like the
Mm.
morning military bugle call.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That one, yeah. And the rocks remain. I think that one could have possibly been a single. A
It
lot.
was a single, I think.
Oh, it
Yeah,
was. It was
I
okay.
think so. Yeah, I think it was. There was a good few singles off that, which did pretty well. Did pretty well in Britain. Um, I think the Rocks Remain was. Yeah,
Okay, it
I
sounded
wouldn't
that's
swear to it, but I mean, like as I say, my memory is
if
not.
it wasn't,
I
it should
don't
have been. Let's just
know.
warm, sweet breath of love. Another one that
Yeah,
I like.
that certainly was. Yeah.
Okay, that one was.
Mm.
And then maybe my favorite, King of Morning, Queen of Day. Yeah,
Oh, really? You like that one? That's interesting. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
That was a lift from. That was a lift. The initial inspiration for that line was a lift from Swinburne, who had a poem called King of something, Queen of Pain, King of Pleasure, Queen of Pain, or something like that. And so we thought that was nice and lifted it. And yeah, but so that's got that Rhodes riff
Yeah,
kicking it off. Yeah,
yeah. I like the roads, the sound of
uh,
roads. Yeah, and then one more, Ride to Hell. I think is
that's yeah, fairly serious stuff. Yeah, yeah.
yes, it sure
My
is.
favorite on that is um, Sideways to the Sun, which has a well, they all have bits of traditional stuff, but that's kind of built around a traditional tune called, is it Roisin Dove, I think, on that one? Yeah. But it kind of blends in with it really nicely. I really like that the way what that achieved. Yeah.
Well, I don't want to bring up old wounds, but when the band broke up, why was
Mhm.
material sold to Outlet Records?
Why was which?
Why was the band's material sold to Outlet Records?
Oh, well, we kind of we had always kind of been pretty careful about our legal situation, and you know our contracts were all pretty well done and pretty watertight. Um, so without getting myself into any kind of legal hot water, after we had broken up and we had kind of gone our separate ways, and we were trying to sort of none of us, no, Eamon and Johnny had a band afterwards called Zen Alligators, and Eamon and Johnny and Charles had a band briefly called The Host. But other than that, we didn't kind of get into other musical pursuits. And so we kind of took our eye off the ball and thought, well, that stuff's okay. You know, we might look at it in a year or two or three and see what else we might do. And, you know, the idea of coming back together or whatever wasn't ever completely off the table. But then we discovered that cassettes were starting, this is before CDs, cassettes were starting to appear that we hadn't sanctioned and didn't know anything about on a label that we knew nothing about. So it was sold without our knowledge and without our consent. The entire catalog was sold without our knowledge or consent. And you know, it's one thing to say, hang on, nobody signed that. Nobody signed any deal conveying ownership of this stuff, and that's kind of our copyrights. But you know, legal stuff, possession's 9/10 of the law, unfortunately. So it was always, as far as we were concerned, ours, but it took us a long time to establish that in court. It was complicated by the fact that there were two separate deals done. As I say, not by us, but like purportedly on our behalf. And the first deal that we tried to engage with, which was that just for Ireland or was it for the rest of the world? I can't remember. Anyway, the first one, the company involved went out of business, and so they were kind of bankrupt, and a receiver was appointed, and we had to go after the receiver, and that just, you know, you're dealing with accountants and lawyers, and that took forever. And we finally got that wrapped up, put it to bed, and then the very next day we went after the other one, and that took a good while too. Um, and yeah, it just legal process. I mean, if you're trying to just, it's you know, it was a better outcome than it could have been. Stuff like when you look at uh, CCS, what do you, Creedence Clearwater Revival.
Oh yeah, yeah.
John, what do you call him?
What is
Uh,
his name? John Fogerty. Fogerty.
Fogerty, yeah. Like he had a terrible time. He had this bad relationship with his brother, who since died, I think. But like for years, he couldn't even listen to his stuff. Never, he couldn't. He refused to play it live. I think he eventually got it back, or he eventually bought it back. But there were some terrible stories that like it inflicts awful damage on your head. A couple of guys from Badfinger who were on Apple,
Oh, okay. Oh yes,
and two of them separately committed suicide.
yes, yeah.
And, attributable to troubles of this kind of
Bad
sort.
management.
So,
Yeah, yeah.
to have come out of it in one piece, I'm really grateful for. I think we kind of got away easy. Yeah.
And Joey
It was a bad
Mullen.
time though. I mean, it's not to be sniffed at, and
Right, right.
people who rip off,
There's no more there living members of Badfinger. Joey Mullen passed away not long ago.
really
He was the last one. Yeah.
sorry to
So
hear that.
yeah.
They were a great band. They were really good.
Oh, weren't they? Oh,
Yeah,
tell me about
super.
it. Yes. Well, now is this accurate? The theme from Glenroe, the
Hmm.
single. Okay, you did release a single. Okay.
Oh, I did. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so the theme tune for the TV show was with the RTE Orchestra, and that was about like 35 seconds, the longest version of it. So I redid a version for the single using Fairlight, and basically kind of reconstructed the whole thing for the single. And both of those are I think on the box set. Certainly the single version is on the box set, the big box set, the recent one, yeah. But that was great fun. I really enjoyed doing
You
that.
enjoy that? Okay.
Oh
All right.
yeah, that was lovely because at the time I had access to, and I wasn't paying for the sessions because it was for a TV theme. So I had access to the radio studios. So I got a band in to do the backing tracks. And then I got access to the orchestra and got the orchestra to do the string overdubs. And then I got access to a mix studio and I did a whole bunch of synthesizer overdubs doing like French horns and harpsichords and
You were
flutes
like
and all sorts of stuff.
you were like a
Such
kid
fun doing that.
you were like a kid in a candy shop there.
Totally, totally. Yeah, it was gorgeous. I
You
loved
had
it.
everything at your fingertips.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Well, talk about how you became involved in radio. How you segued to.
In the early 80s, Barry and I were kind of kicking stuff around together, and a friend of ours was working on a TV show, like a chat show, and he said, "We need somebody to do music. Would you be interested in doing music director on the show?" And we said, "What, the two of us?" And he said, "Up to you. Do you want to do it like jointly?" And so we saw a way that that would work, and we went in and did it, and then just started doing more TV stuff, and I started doing music for films and TV dramas and stuff like that. And we did a couple of other series. Um, and then after a couple of years of that, I moved over to radio because what I really liked doing was being behind a studio desk. And so I felt like right back at home. I didn't miss being on the road because at that stage I was married and started having family. And being behind a desk in a studio and recording bands and going doing live concert recordings was happy days. Yeah, it was great.
I would have loved that kind of work,
Yeah.
as well. Unfortunately, when I was in college, I'd gone into business administration, and I was close to graduating. When I started having doubts, and I said, I don't want to go through 3 or 4 more years or whatever it would be,
Yep.
in broadcasting. So I just finished out business. But yeah, I've always had a longing to do that.
It's
Actually,
really,
I'd like to.
really nice. It's addictive. I mean, like people who get into it, you can see that it's an addiction, and there are people who are so devoted to it. A lot of the people that I worked with, I mean, I didn't kind of come up through a radio environment particularly. I mean, I listened to radio and when we were in the States, like every place we went, the PR people would be bringing us into radio stations. So I saw the inside of an awful lot of FM stations before we had those kind of stations here. And so like I had all that American radio experience to bring with me when I went into radio here. And that was, I was kind of taking it for granted, and I was surprised that a lot of people didn't have the same, didn't take a lot of that same stuff for granted. But a lot of the people that I was working with had kind of come through school wanting to be DJs, and having a mic in the garage at home, and all that sort of
Yeah,
stuff.
right, right,
And they're still there. They're still radio mad, radio crazy. It's great to
yeah,
see. It's lovely to see that enthusiasm.
right, right. Speaking of getting that American background and all that,
Oh yeah,
John Peel
yeah.
got his start over here in Oklahoma. I think it was Oklahoma City.
Was it Oklahoma? I thought he might have been Texas. He was somewhere. He was somewhere down there. Anyway,
Yeah,
yeah.
Oklahoma. Yeah. So it was very interesting.
He
Yeah.
played his youth in the States. Yeah, yeah.
Well, how long were you with RTE 2FM?
Until a couple of years ago, well, I moved from 2FM over to Radio 1. So I moved from
Right.
like pop radio, rock radio, over into speech radio, and did that for a good few years. And then I moved from producing to presenting. So I had always kind of shied away from being behind a mic. And then when I got into doing that, I discovered I really liked it, and I really liked DJing. And I put such care and attention into it, and I would sort of spend forever doing my segues and stuff. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
Uh, so
Yeah.
yeah, it was great
Well,
fun. Enjoyed
that-
that hugely. Worked with some amazing people. Learned a lot from all of them. I mean, it was a wonderful experience. I couldn't have asked for better. It was super.
yeah, I could see how addicting that would be.
Yeah.
I could just imagine. Well, what was the impetus for the Horslips reunion in 2004?
Um, a couple of friends of ours, a couple of fans, who had come to see us a lot, like in the first time around, when we got stuff back together, um, and they found each other on the internet. One of them had a collection of posters, another had a collection of singles, another had a collection of artwork and stuff. I can't remember what else. And they kind of got to talk to each other. These three guys, um, Stephen Ferris and Jim Nealis and Paul Callan, from the north, and they said, "Wouldn't it be great to actually put on? We've got a bunch of stuff between us. Wouldn't it be great to put together an exhibition, a Horslips exhibition?" I said, "Really? Wow, what an idea!" And so they did. And Jim rang me one day and said, "We're looking at doing this kind of exhibition thing. Would you have any objection?" I said, "No, sounds cool. Nice idea. Thank you very much." He said, "If we get it together, would you come along to the opening?" I said, "Yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah, sure." So this was kind of wildly in the future, and it was a speculative, and it was a possibility that might or might not happen someday down the road. And when it did happen, like about 2 years later, maybe longer, I don't know. They said, "Look, so it's going to be August or whenever it was. You ready for coming up?" So we said, "Yeah, sure, great." And we started talking to each other. I said, "It'd be pretty kind of bad form if we went up to the opening of an exhibition and they say, 'Would you play us a tune?'" And we said, "We can't. We haven't played in like 20 years."
Yeah.
So we thought we'd better actually get a couple of pieces that we can just do acoustically. And so um, we got together in my front room around the piano, and started to play a couple of bits and pieces. And I remember the opening of Furniture. You mentioned Furniture. The opening of Furniture starts with a flute, and so I played the opening riff on the flute, and then Johnny came in behind me with the guitar, and that hadn't happened in like 20 odd years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when it did, it, like, the hairs in the back of my neck just stood. I was like, "Oh wow,
Yeah.
that's what this was. This is what that was about." So we went up and we did what are 5 or 6 songs acoustic just on a stage, and that was lovely. And then we really didn't reckon that we would be. We didn't reckon that doing full like rock and roll electric show was a runner ever. But people kept kind of saying it, including Dennis Desmond, who's the main promoter here, and he kind of kept nagging at us. So I said, "Yeah." So just check it out, do a bit of rehearsal. So we
Yeah.
booked ourselves into a bar in the daytime, that sort of music bar. And we had a stage and stuff and a PA. And we spent a week in there just knocking up stuff and going through things. And by the end of the week, we were kind of thinking, this might be a runner, this might be okay. And our roadie, Pat McGuire, came in with an evening paper, and and said, we said, Pat, this is starting to sound okay. We think there might be something in it, but, we'd give it a bit of time. And he said, you better give it a bit of time because it's in the paper. And Dennis
Oh,
had
dude, it was
taken the ball
it
and
was
run with it.
there.
We actually had the ads in the paper. And he put us into the biggest venue in town. And we thought, no way, we're never going to fill that. And it was amazing. I mean, it was brilliant. So, like, we had this comeback show after 29 years, and we put like 13,000 people into this big venue, which was
Wow.
pretty astonishing. Yeah.
Wow. Well, once you brushed a little of the dust off, was it just like getting back on the bicycle again
It
for
was
you guys?
better than getting back on the bicycle
Yeah.
because people had been listening to different stuff and playing different stuff. Charles had started playing tenor guitar as well. Johnny, coincidentally, had started playing tenor guitar, and everybody had kind of moved on. Eamon had said, "Look, I think I don't know if I'd be physically able to handle the drums because I mean it's one thing to play guitar, it's another thing to sit behind a kit."
Yeah.
So you should get Johnny's brother, Johnny Faint's brother, Ray, who's a professional drummer, had been playing for years with Riverdance and then with Celtic Woman, doing like 8 gigs a week or whatever they were doing. And so we got Ray in and did a couple of weeks intensive, and sure enough, Eamon was right because it took a lot out of Ray, and he was kind of seriously fit boy. Um, and and it was great. It was like it was better. It was better. It was like fuller and louder and stronger, and because people had just moved on, and learned a lot more stuff. We were bigger and bolder and brassier, and
The three B's. Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah, the album Rollback was recorded and released, and on the Horslips website, you called it a sort of unplugged album.
yeah, it was, yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much. The keyboards were plugged, but
Yeah.
everything else was acoustic.
Everything else was unplugged. Well, uh, the whole time, you were still playing as a musician. What brought the band back together in 2009?
That was it. It was Dennis Desmond and his impetus. That was what caused that to happen. The unplugged album, the rollback album,
Yeah,
was really just sort of get us back into studio and see. We just started. Unplugged albums were kind of a thing at the time. There was Nirvana and there was whoever else. There was a lot of people doing it. Clapton, everybody was doing it. But we had always kind of had that acoustic angle to stuff, and some of these songs had started off as acoustic songs anyway,
yeah,
um, and so it seemed like a good idea, and we started playing the stuff, and it sounded
yeah,
good. So we thought, um, yeah, that sounds like a
yeah,
runner, particularly with that kind of new thing of with the new kind of sonic thing of the tenor guitars. And we spent a bit of time over in Charles's place in Yorkshire, in England, because he had a kind of studio at home, and we did a bit of messing around over there from time to time, two or three of us at a time. We'd go over and back. And so yeah, it was just kind of momentum. It was snowball started rolling down a hill.
yeah,
But the big electric comeback in 2009, that was the impetus for that was pretty much totally from Dennis Desmond and from our manager at the time, Shay Hennessy, who had steered the business, the illegal business of getting our rights back, through all those kind of legal quagmires, and he had kept meticulous records and dealt with the lawyers and dealt with the accountants, and he made that possible. He looked after all that. And he had been saying, I really think you should get back together. I think you should go and do some live stuff. And yeah, so between Shay and Dennis, that was we got
okay.
blackmailed into it. Yeah,
You got your arms twisted.
pretty much.
Well, you did record the Live at the O2 album,
Hmm.
and then a couple of years later, a second live album, Live at the Waterfront, Belfast.
Yeah,
Which
that was with the orchestra because Barry had been in Belfast at a concert of I think it might have been Paul Brady with
Ah,
the BBC Ulster Orchestra, and he got talking to the producer, a guy called Declan. Declan's second name escapes me. Um, and So that'd be fun to do. We might, would you ever think about doing a Horslips thing? And Declan said, "Whoa, what a lovely idea. Let me think about that." And he took that and ran with it, and got an Irish film composer called Brian Byrne, who lives most of the time, I think, in Hollywood now, um, to sit down and do some dots for our stuff. And Brian rang me, and we went through it, because I'd be seen as the one who could sort of talk written music language with the boffins. So we talked it through, and he did wonderful string arrangements of our stuff, and made it the stuff glowed. And there's this extraordinary thing that kind of occurred to me when we were playing with them. I mean, I'd been doing stuff. I'd been working with the orchestra in RTE. There's two orchestras in RTE. I'd mostly worked with the concert orchestra, which is about like 45, 50 strong. Really, really good players. They can do a whole bunch of different stuff. They can turn on a sixpence. They can play jazz, classics, opera, um, Great American Songbook. They're really incredibly versatile. Um, so I'd kind of a good bit of experience of working with orchestras and just scores and arrangements and all that kind of stuff. Um, but it really only hit me when we did the thing with the Ulster Orchestra, which is a bit bigger than the concert orchestra. I think the Ulster Orchestra is about 65-ish or something strong. But like your average orchestral player, say they're 35, and they've been playing since they were 10. That's 25 years of learning and playing and practicing on scales and arpeggios and pieces and exams, and playing and practicing scales and arpeggios and exams and playing and
yeah,
practicing for
yeah,
25 years. Four of them, 100 years. 40
right.
of them, that's 1,000 years.
Yeah, that's right.
1,500 person years
Yeah,
on the stage behind you, all turning on a sixpence at
yes,
the point of the conductor's baton,
yeah,
all like um, enslaved to this one precise musical moment in time. And like I was at a concert last week, and they were in Schumann and Ravel and um, somebody else, kind of, but it's big orchestra, like. So I think there was like 100 people on stage with six
mm,
percussionists. Um, that's an extraordinary concentration of ability and expertise uh,
yes,
for one precise purpose that changes moment to moment. It's an extraordinary thing. And if you're out there and there's like five of you playing your own music, that you've worked on like over your instrument at home, and you've thought up these tunes and you've thought up these lyrics and you've thought up these melodies and these rhythms, and suddenly you're out there and there's this amazing amount of power and just genius being pushing you forward. It's the most amazing feeling. It was fabulous. Charles at some point turned around and said, "You've no idea what it's like, knowing that there's like however many first and second violins and however many violas were like right behind him, all of which he said were playing infinitely better, capable of playing infinitely better than him. But of course, they were deferring to what he was doing because
yeah.
he was
That's
whose stuff it was.
so
But it was
great.
love of kind of mutual respect, and the same with the RTE concert orchestra when we did it under another conductor, under David Brophy, back here in the National Concert Hall in Dublin. Um, and Brof was actually conducting a concert I was at last week with it was great stuff. He was doing the Ravel, and brilliant conductor. It's a fab experience. It was gorgeous. Yeah,
Oh,
that
I
was
can.
the live at the waterfront. That was the and then we did on the BBC box set. We put out a different mix of that. We put out the live mix that had gone out on radio on the night, because the actual CD version that came out, we had remixed the multis, because it gives you a slightly more surgical mix, but there's always something a bit animal and unpredictable about a live mix, which is kind of nice. So it's good to get that out there in the open air as well.
Yes, and needless to say, the concert went down well.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It was brilliant. Yeah, it was magic.
Well,
Sport.
speaking of the this year's release, the Horslips at the BBC,
Mm.
collection of tracks recorded for the BBC over the years, and it's available on CD, DVD, and 2 LPs. So, and then speaking of John Peel, it includes John Peel shows, the Old Grey Whistle Test
Mhm.
performances. Yes, I remember that show. I remember watching that.
Those great programs, really
Yeah,
good at the time. Yeah, Whispering Bob Harris. Yeah,
yes.
we did a kind of group photograph with Whispering Bob
Mm.
a couple of years ago. We played with Fairport Convention at their festival. They do an annual festival, as you probably know, in Croppeready, and they've done it for like 20 or 30 years, and it's gorgeous because it's like out in the most beautiful part of the English countryside with little canals and thatched cottages. I mean, it's like this dream of old. It's like the Shire from The Hobbit, is what it's like.
Yes,
Um, and
yes.
the vibe at the festival is just wonderful.
Wow.
It's gorgeous. So we did a group photograph with Fairport and Whispering Bob and us. It was great. Lovely to see that.
I love Benny Hill's impression of Bob Harris. Have you ever seen that?
No, really?
Yeah, with the gruff voice, and he's got the beard. And it's hilarious.
I'll have
You
to
could
find
probably
that.
look that up on
Yeah,
YouTube
I'll find it.
and
It'll
see
be on YouTube
that. Yeah,
somewhere. Yeah.
old Benny, old Benny. Well, are there any talks or plans to record any new material with Horslips?
Yeah, we've been playing over the last number of years. We've done a good few things with Paul Muldoon, poet, who is also a professor in Princeton. He's an amazing poet, uh, and so he's a mate from a long time back, and we've done a couple of concerts, and we've also recorded a little bit with him, so we might be bringing that out. We don't know what we'll call ourselves. That was me and Barry and Muldoon and Ray Fian and a friend of ours on guitar, because Johnny, our guitar player, sadly died just over a year and a half ago, which was a really that was pretty awful because he died really suddenly. He wasn't in bad health. He just, I mean, yeah, it was rough. So I don't know what we'll call ourselves, but we have a few things kind of on the shelf, and we might put them out. We're talking about what we can do with them. Um, we have I think I'm now able to say that we're going to be reissuing Drive a Cold Winter Away at some stage between now and Christmas, remastered version, um, and which is why I was listening to it last night. And what else? That's kind of pretty much it, I think, for the moment. Don't know what else we might be doing. Barry is Barry is working on an animated feature. So I might be doing a bit of stuff on that with them, and we might be doing some other TV stuff together. I don't know. Eamon's just got a book out. Um, uh, Blanked on the name of it. It's got a cassette on the cover. It's great. It's excellent. That's a collection of his journalism pieces. Um, and so he's on the road now, promoting that. Charles has gone back to being an artist, and and he's doing ceramics and painting in his studio at home in Yorkshire. His daughter just got married a couple of weeks ago, and yeah, so there's a whole bunch of stuff always going on. Everybody's always just doing stuff, you know.
Okay, well, we're going to ask the viewers to check the website from time to time
Yep.
and so for any updates on that. Okay, all right, Jim.
Cool.
Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate your time and going back in that time machine with me and recounting some of your musical experiences and recollections in your journey. It's always enjoyable doing these things. I wouldn't do it if it wasn't. So it's a no-brainer for me. I enjoy hearing your stories, and
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, and thanks for being there. Yeah.
okay.
You
Well,
obviously know the stuff very well. Yeah.
well, I do like doing the research. I think I also like tracking you guys down too. Sometimes it's frustrating. But I think might have missed my calling as a private eye or a detective. Because that side of it, I do enjoy. Doing
I
that.
can imagine. Yeah. Good to hear.
All right, Jim. Again,
Okay.
thank you so much, and all
Well,
the
take
best to
care.
you. And
Thanks, Greg.
do keep in touch. All right.
Okay,
I will
will
too.
do. God bless. Take care. Bye bye.
God bless.